Welcome to the Rock Font Pack walkthrough video. As you saw in the promo, it is a rock font broken up into individual rock pieces that can be animated. Now, even though the pack itself was primarily designed with Element 3D in mind, they are simply OBJ files that can be brought into any 3D application and rendered and animated as you see fit. So just keep that in mind as we explore the pack from within Element itself. So here we are in After Effects. Element has already been added to the scene. Let's open it up and have a look. Once you've installed the pack, it will show up in your models browser. Here, Font Rock. All the OBJs will show up in one folder, and the presets will be in other folders split up for your convenience. Lowercase, numbers, symbols, and uppercase. So let's just add one to the scene. And here we are. Each rock piece is its own individual object, and the model itself is UV mapped. Having said that, let's have a look at the textures. Very simple, same texture used for the diffuse, glossy, and reflectivity. A normal map, and a curvature map, which is really at the heart of the material. Now, the curvature map is added to the occlusion slot and is the only texture that is concerned with the UV coordinates. All these others are simply tileable textures. Now, that gives you, the artist, a lot of flexibility, but there are some constraints. So I'll just highlight what that is. So here's the texture that comes with the pack. It's detailed, not a lot of pattern that the eye can detect. It has a little bit of confusion that helps with minimizing the effects of any UV seams. So I'll show you what that means. So here's another texture that would work well. A lot of detail, a lot of confusion, no patterns that are detectable to the eye. So let's just add that to the model. Works well. To bring back some of those highlights, you'll be working with really just crushing and playing around with these input levels. And you've got those. That's a bit overkill, but you can see you've got the worn edge look coming back again. So as I said, whatever texture you decide to put on these models, it's really this curvature map that is the driver behind this worn edge look and gives definition to the rock pieces themselves. So let's have a look at another texture. This is a scratched plate texture. These are just examples, of course, they don't come with a pack, but just for your own information. Okay, just a second. I'm going over the video, I'm listening to the audio, and yes, I need a new microphone. But I get to this point and I think to myself, why aren't those textures in the pack? So I change my mind and those two textures are in there. You would think these lines would interfere with the UV seams, but because there's so many scratches, it really is minimized. So let's have a look at that. Let's take down these edges, and you can see that those scratches really do work quite well. If that's not enough detail, and the reason why they are just tileable textures and not tied to a UV map coordinate system, is so that you can come in here and change the level of detail to what you want to change it to. Or you could just copy, paste. And so you're starting to get a finer detail with no perceptible repeating. Now you don't have to use tileable textures, because what's showing up here is according to the UV coordinate system. So you could get away with textures that don't tile, but you are kind of limited to the look of something that is confused, doesn't have a lot of pattern that the eye can detect, and I'll show you why. Here's your classic pattern, brickwork. Let's just add that. And you can see that when you use something that's a pattern, it doesn't quite work well. It doesn't work at all. Just drop this back. Now, of course, you're not limited to using just the models with their UV coordinates. You can come back up here to the model, change the UV coordinate, and you can use patterns on there, but you don't have the accessibility of using this. This is based on a UV coordinate system, so you lose the ability to define these edges on each segment. So this is what the curvature map looks like. I've blurred it. I've taken out the concave dark areas, and you're left with the convex highlights. Blurred it, and then I've added, you may not be able to see that in the video, but I've added a slight grain to it, and that helps with controlling compression artifacts. Not only when I'm saving it as a file here, but when you come in here and are playing around with the input levels, you're crushing the blacks and crushing the whites, you're going to end up with, if I didn't add the grain, you would end up with compression artifacts, unfortunately. But the grain works well in minimizing all that. Alright, so let's just get rid of that. So we have our base model, our base textures, and as I said in the start, the curvature map is really the driver for everything. So let's just have a look at some examples of creating the look that you want to create. So here's one I've created that's kind of like ice, maybe not. A little bit of refraction maybe. And the way I've created that is I've played around with the illumination. Here's another example, like a volcanic rock. Everything's basically the same. Change the color of the diffuse map. Gave it a tinge of blue for the reflectance. And that's pretty much it. Here's a metal. The worn edges are now more reflective. So you're not limited to just a rock. You can kind of create whatever you want to create. And for this metal, in the reflectance, I added the curvature to that channel. So the texture system for these models are quite simple, but gives you a lot of flexibility. So the idea is when you're creating words or a scene of some sort, you put them into a group, add your letters, best if you're in front preview, there you have it. Duplicate the folder, put one on group 1, one folder on group 2, and hit OK. And then once back in After Effects, you can animate it as you wish. Look, multi-object, animation engine, enable. Random. There you have it, animated as you see fit. Okay, so just to go back over just some concepts of the pack itself. The model is UV mapped, but it's only the curvature map that is linked to it or concerned with it. Every other texture that you want to add to the model itself can be anything you want. The curvature map is really the driving force behind the look of the rocks themselves. I've shown that you can create any kind of look that you really want, within reason and within this type of style, of course, to make these rocks look how you want them to look. I found that when I was creating the pack that having these textures at 4K resolution slowed everything down and didn't actually give an advantage. The smaller maps at 2K are big enough to give you heaps of detail, and doubling the UV coordinates of these doesn't slow down the system as much. The curvature maps themselves are actually 4K, and that's because they are linked to the UV map coordinates, and you do need as big as possible to give this clarity and to minimize compression artifacts and all that. Well, that's been the Rock Font Pack walkthrough. My name is Martin Staley. Thanks for joining me.